Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Chicago, a crisp spring morning. The city is slowly waking up to the drone of sirens and the click of heels on the sidewalks. In the South Side neighborhood, known for its lively life but also for its social tensions, a 15-year-old boy, Marcus Johnson, crosses the street with his books clutched to his chest. Marcus is no ordinary teenager, a genius in math and science. He spends his days studying and competing in national academic competitions. Yet, that morning, fate knocked on his door in the form of the agent Stephen Miller, an arrogant and racist police officer, quick to judge the neighborhood youth without evidence or reason. Marcus is accused of a robbery he didn't commit. Passers-by stop, some shocked, others helpless, as the teenager is handcuffed and led to the county courthouse. In the courtroom, the judge Richard Whitman, a man known for his arrogance and contempt for young people from disadvantaged neighborhoods, is about to receive Marcus. He already thinks he knows the story, a young delinquent who needs to be corrected. But what he doesn't know is that Marcus isn't just innocent, he's a brilliant mind, capable of appending all preconceived notions. What begins as a trivial matter will become a lesson in humility for the judge and a revelation for the entire city. The sun had barely risen over the South Side when Marcus Johnson left the public library, his arms laden with books on artificial intelligence and quantum physics. He walked calmly home, crossing the still little-used streets. Suddenly, a patrol car stopped abruptly next to him. The officer Stephen Miller, a police officer with an impulsive temperament and deep-rooted prejudices, got out of the vehicle. He eyed Marcus suspiciously, frowning. "Hey, you! Stop!" Miller shouted, his voice echoing through the silent street. Marcus, surprised, raised his hands but made no aggressive gesture. "Yes, officer." "What's going on?" he asked calmly. Miller, without listening to any explanation, accused him of stealing from a nearby business, claiming he fit the description of a suspect. Marcus, of course, knew he hadn't done anything, but he remained polite and cooperative. "You're mistaken, sir. I'm from the library. I can show you my books and my borrowing receipt." Miller shook his head, indifferent. "You're exactly the kind of kid who causes trouble. Show me your papers." Marcus calmly searched for his bag, handing over his student ID and library receipts. But Officer Miller wouldn't listen. As passers-by watched, Marcus was handcuffed and led to the Cook County Court. Despite the blatant injustice, Marcus showed no fear. In his mind, he knew the truth would eventually come out. His calm and dignity were his weapons against the officer's arrogance. This simple appearance in court would soon reveal much more than his innocence. He would show the world that beneath his 15 years lay an extraordinary mind. The Cook County courtroom was packed that morning. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of spectators who had come to witness what was considered a trivial case, a teenager accused of a minor crime. But Marcus Johnson didn't know that this day would be a memorable one for everyone present. The judge Richard Whitman, a man in his 50s, known for his arrogance and contempt for young people from disadvantaged neighborhoods, entered the room with his usual air of superiority. His eyes fell on Marcus condescendingly. "So, you're the neighborhood genius, huh?" Whitman said with a sarcastic smile. "Tell me, kid, do you really think your words will convince me?" Marcus, upright and calm, showed no fear or irritation. "Your Honor, I am here to present the facts as they actually happened." Whitman burst out laughing dryly. "Presenting the facts? At your age?" Despite the judge's sarcasm, Marcus pulled his documents from his bag, library receipts, detailed notes about his day, and even written testimonies from passers-by. Each piece of evidence was organized with impressive precision, demonstrating his rigor and intelligence. The lawyers present exchanged astonished glances. Marcus, with a calm and maturity rare for a teenager, presented the facts clearly and logically, making Miller's case appear increasingly fragile. The judge, who thought he was enjoying ridiculing a child, was beginning to feel that things were getting out of hand. As Marcus explained each detail, it became clear to everyone in the room that he was not just innocent, he possessed a brilliant mind, capable of thinking with logic and depth that far exceeded his years. Whitman, for the first time in a long time, felt the icy air of humility brush against him. His arrogant gaze gave way to a hint of incredulity. The judgment would soon take an unexpected turn, and Judge Whitman's world, founded on certainty and contempt, would falter under the intelligence and dignity of a 15-year-old boy. Marcus stood straight before Judge Whitman, his hands calmly placed on the table. Every word he spoke was clear, precise, and couched in a logic that even the lawyers had difficulty following. "Your Honor," Marcus began, "I never left the library before being handcuffed. Borrowing receipts and staff testimony show that I followed all the rules." Officer Miller, red with anger, tried to interrupt him. "This kid is talking nonsense." But Marcus was not intimidated. "I can also demonstrate that the officer made a mistake in mistaking me for another individual. Here is the evidence." He pulled out photos, transcripts, and detailed notes from his advanced science classes, detailing schedules and travel times. Every detail corroborated his version of events. Judge Whitman, who had expected to see a frightened, babbling teenager, felt a mixture of surprise and annoyance. How could a 15-year-old boy be so organized, calm, and intelligent? Then Marcus did something unexpected. He explained a complex physics concept applied to cybersecurity, connecting the evidence in a logical and rational way. Murmurs spread through the room. The lawyers and even the prosecutor leaned in to listen attentively. Whitman frowned incredulously. "Wait, you understand these concepts, at your age?" Marcus nodded modestly. "Yes, Your Honor. I have been studying these subjects for several years and have participated in national competitions." The judge felt his arrogance waver. The air in the room had changed. What he had thought was a simple case of adolescent delinquency was transforming into an impressive display of intelligence and maturity. Marcus wasn't just innocent, he was exceptional. For the first time, Whitman realized he had judged someone before even listening. And this young boy had just taught him a lesson he would never forget. The murmur in the courtroom continued to grow. Marcus calmly opened one of his science books and showed complex diagrams of projects he had been working on. "Your Honor," he said, "I am currently enrolled in advanced math and physics courses at St. Patrick's Academy High School. I have won several national science competitions, including the National Science Talent Search and the Young Innovators Award." Judge Whitman first burst into condescending laughter. "Contests? Prizes for a kid?" But Marcus wasn't intimidated. He began explaining an advanced scientific concept related to cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. The technical terms he used were precise, the examples clear and logical, and he quickly made the connection to the current situation, how misidentification could be avoided through intelligent algorithms and rational analysis. The prosecutor, the lawyers, and even some of the journalists present in the room remained silent, fascinated by the depth of his knowledge. The notes and evidence he presented were not simply arguments, they demonstrated a mind capable of understanding and anticipating complex systems, well beyond his years. Whitman felt his arrogance crumble. He wasn't just facing a teenager anymore, he was facing a genius. The man who had begun this hearing thinking he was belittling a kid realized that Marcus had the ability to overturn all his certainties. The silence that followed Marcus's presentation was thick with awe and disbelief. Even the usually arrogant Agent Miller looked down, unable to argue with Marcus's clear and logical presentation. It was a watershed moment. Marcus was no longer just a defendant to be defended, he was living proof that talent and intelligence are not measured by age or appearance. Judge Whitman would have to rethink not only his judgment in this case, but also his deeply held prejudices. The atmosphere in the courtroom had changed radically. Murmurs of curiosity and admiration now replaced the initial skepticism. The spectators, who had come to see a simple accused teenager, realized they were witnessing something exceptional. Marcus, always calm and collected, continued to present his arguments with a precision that left everyone speechless. He explained, with diagrams and evidence, how misidentifications occur in the judicial system and how scientific logic could clarify seemingly confusing situations. Judge Whitman sat in his chair, lost in thought. His brows furrowed, his expression changing from surprise to disbelief. He had expected to belittle a cheeky teenager, but instead he was confronted by a brilliant, thoughtful mind. Even Officer Miller, who had arrogantly driven Marcus into court, seemed embarrassed. Every point Marcus made further undermined the prosecution and highlighted the officer's incompetence. The lawyers and the prosecutor were frantically taking notes. Marcus's mastery of legal and scientific language exceeded anything they had imagined. Marcus wasn't just defending his own innocence, he was transforming the perception of everyone in the room. What had begun as a simple legal case was transformed into a display of genius and dignity. Whitman, for the first time, felt his arrogance give way to a form of respect and humility. He realized that he had judged too quickly, based on prejudice, and that he now found himself facing a teenager capable of surprising him and teaching him a valuable lesson. The audience, once skeptical, was now captivated. Marcus had transformed the audience, and no one would ever forget what they had just seen. The young boy was no longer simply a defendant, he had become a living example of intelligence, courage, and dignity. Judge Whitman, still in shock from Marcus's demonstration, took a deep breath. His mind was torn between disbelief and curiosity. He decided to put Marcus to the test, to see if all this apparent intelligence was just a facade. "All right, Marcus," Whitman said, his voice slightly shaky but firm. "If you really are as brilliant as you claim to be, solve this problem for me." He stood up and wrote a complex mathematical equation on the blackboard, an applied physics problem combining algebra, calculus, and logic. Most of the adults present would have hesitated, some for hours, before finding the solution. Marcus stared at the equation for a few seconds, closed his eyes to think, and smiled slightly. Then, calmly, he began to explain each step, detailing his method with a clarity and logic that impressed everyone. The lawyers and the prosecutor listened attentively, amazed. Even the audience, accustomed to dull hearings, held its breath. Marcus solved the equation in a few minutes, providing not only the correct answer but also an alternative explanation that demonstrated an even deeper understanding of the problem. Silence reigned in the room. Whitman's mouth was open, struggling to hide his admiration and embarrassment. For the first time in years, he had been surpassed by a teenager. Humility crossed his face as he realized he had judged this boy on appearances, not the truth. Marcus wasn't boasting. He simply remained calm, humble, and logical, letting the strength of his mind speak for him. The test Whitman had hoped to use to trap him had backfired, revealing not only Marcus's genius but also the depth of the judge's prejudices. At that moment, everyone in the room understood that Marcus was not just a teenager, he was an exceptional mind, capable of changing perceptions and leaving a lasting impression on those who had the chance to see him at work. Having brilliantly solved Judge Whitman's problem, Marcus stood up and looked around. The courtroom, which had begun the morning in doubt and contempt, was now captivated by every word he spoke. "Your Honor," Marcus began, his voice calm but assured, "if I may, this problem is not just about the equation you gave me. It illustrates how errors of judgment, like the one that brought me here today, can occur in our system." Judge Whitman frowned, intrigued but also a little worried. Marcus continued. "With some logical and scientific methods, we could analyze situations more fairly and prevent innocent teenagers from being wrongly accused. For example, identification systems assisted by artificial intelligence could reduce human errors in investigations." Officer Miller, who had arrogantly driven Marcus to court, felt increasingly uncomfortable. Every suggestion Marcus made demonstrated not only his intelligence, but also a maturity rare for a 15-year-old boy. The lawyers and the prosecutor frantically took notes, impressed by his ability to connect his scientific knowledge to concrete real-life situations. The stunned audience gradually understood that Marcus was not only innocent, he was a genius capable of thinking beyond most of the adults present. Whitman, for his part, felt a mixture of humility and shame. He had begun this hearing expecting to humiliate a teenager. Now he was confronted by someone who could not only solve complex problems, but also propose solutions to improve justice itself. The reversal was complete, the accused had taken moral and intellectual control of the audience. Whitman realized he had just learned a lesson he would never forget. Marcus wasn't there just to defend himself, He had just shown that respect and intelligence know neither age nor skin color. At the end of the hearing, a solemn silence reigned in the room. Marcus had presented all his arguments with irrefutable clarity and logic. The evidence was impeccable, and his mastery of scientific and legal concepts had left everyone speechless. Judge Whitman, his face a mixture of respect and shame, spoke. Marcus Johnson. I must admit that I was too quick to judge. I was guided by stupid and unfair prejudices. I withdraw all accusations against you. The murmur in the room turned into a gasp of admiration and relief. Marcus's parents, seated in the stands, burst into tears of pride. They knew that their son was not only innocent, he had left his mark on the history of this court with his intelligence and dignity. Marcus, humble, replied with a smile. Thank you, Your Honor. I wasn't trying to impress, just to show the truth. The reporters present took frantic notes. The spectators, once skeptical, were now fascinated. Marcus had transformed this courtroom into a place of recognition and inspiration. Even Agent Miller, though still embarrassed, could not deny the young boy's talent and courage. Whitman, still in shock, stood up and extended his hand to Marcus. I owe you an apology, Marcus. I've learned a lesson I'll never forget. The boy shook her respectfully, knowing that this gesture symbolized much more than a simple reconciliation. It was recognition of her genius, her dignity, and her ability to change the perceptions of even the most arrogant adults. In the days that followed, Marcus Johnson's story spread throughout the city. Local newspapers and media outlets recounted the story of the boy who had unwittingly humiliated a judge with his intelligence and maturity. Marcus became a symbol of hope and excellence for the entire community, proving that justice, when confronted with the truth, can be just and inspiring. Within weeks of the hearing, news of Marcus Johnson's exceptional intelligence spread quickly throughout Chicago and beyond. Newspapers, television stations, and social media recounted the story of the boy who had not only defended his innocence but also impressed an experienced judge with his scientific and legal mastery. Marcus quickly became a symbol of excellence and perseverance. Prestigious schools, scientific institutes, and even renowned universities began sending him invitations to participate in conferences and special programs for young talents. Yet despite this sudden recognition, Marcus remained humble. He continued to frequent the public library, help his classmates with their homework, and work on his science projects. His proud but vigilant parents kept him grounded, reminding them that true greatness lies as much in modesty as in talent. Agent Miller, whose initial mistake had triggered this whole adventure, was confronted with his own arrogance. The media exposure and Marcus's pride prompted Miller to reflect on his past biases and behaviors. Even Judge Whitman, transformed by this experience, began taking steps to better listen and understand before judging, particularly young people and members of minority communities. Marcus, meanwhile, became a mentor to other teenagers in the neighborhood, encouraging each to believe in their abilities and never be intimidated by prejudice or injustice. The courtroom where he had been wrongfully accused became a symbol of a turning point in his life, a place where his intelligence and dignity had triumphed. In just a few months, Marcus Johnson was no longer just a South Side teenager, he had become an inspirational figure, a living example that talent and determination can overcome any obstacle, even those imposed by the most powerful and prejudiced adults. A few months after the hearing, the judge Richard Whitman Marcus Johnson often returned to his thoughts. The experience had left a deep impression on him. He had thought he knew the truth about a teenager and had judged too quickly, guided by unfair prejudices. Whitman began to change his approach. He now listened carefully to each person, unaffected by appearance, age, or neighborhood. The young people before him were no longer delinquents to be corrected, but individuals with stories, talents, and rights to assert. One day, at a conference on justice and education, Whitman spoke about the experience with Marcus to an audience of judges, lawyers, and educators. I thought a teenager couldn't surprise me, until I met Marcus Johnson. This young boy taught me humility, patience, and respect. I learned that judging before listening can lead to irreversible mistakes. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his journey with modesty and determination. His scientific projects and his initiatives to help other teenagers inspired the entire Chicago community. He had become a living symbol that intelligence, courage, and dignity can triumph over injustice and prejudice. So Marcus Johnson's story wasn't just about a brilliant teenager standing up for his innocence, it became a lesson for everyone. A lesson that respect and listening are more powerful than arrogance and hasty judgment. And that sometimes, those who seem weakest or insignificant can teach the most powerful adults the greatest lessons. Judge Whitman never forgot him, and the city of Chicago long remembered the teenager who transformed a courtroom into a scene of admiration and revelation.